I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome to the City of Belleville Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee meeting. I'm the Chair, Sean Kelly, and we welcome our YouTube audience today as well. Let's do an attendance check. We'll go to Sheila Alexander. How are we doing for committee members, Sheila?
Well, Chair, we're just missing just 2 members today, one with regrets from the Hastings Hastings Prince Edward Public Health due to work related, and we're just waiting for one more member to join us.
All right, thank you, Sheila. We'll go to disclosures of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Anybody have an issue today? All right, we're all good. Can we get a motion to approve the minutes of the February 16th meeting? Can I get a mover? Councilor Thompson, seconded by Councilor Millette. Any concerns, any questions regarding the minutes? All those in favor? Approved, thank you. No correspondence today. Deputations. Well, it's a pleasure to welcome longtime educator from the Quinte area, Carrie Smith-Dewey. She is a superintendent of education with the Algonquin Lakeshore Catholic School Board. She's worked at many elementary and secondary schools here in the Belleville area. I know Carrie Smith-Dewey well. My kids graduated from St. Teresa's, and she was the last person to shake their hands on the way out. So she's going to update us on what's going on within the school board, Algonquin Lakeshore Catholic School Board, with diversity, inclusion, equity, how things have changed. It's a big school board, 44 schools and close to 12,000 students. So Carrie, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Oh, thank you very much, Sean. It's my pleasure to be here with you today. I've created a bit of a PowerPoint, so I'll share my screen now and we can begin. Certainly, if you have any questions or if you'd like to stop at any point, don't hesitate to do so. And I'll certainly take questions in the end. Can everybody see the screen? Okay, good. So as Sean has indicated, I'm a superintendent of education. I have only been in the role since August of 2020, so it's new to me, but my portfolios include caring in safe schools, pandemic response, which certainly has been a big one over the course of this school year, Indigenous education, student success, and as well I'm the lead superintendent for secondary. So new this year to the Algonquin and Lakeshore Catholic District School Board is our vision and mission statements, as well as our areas of priority, which are faith, equity and well-being, achievement and innovation, and resource management. So in our time together this morning, I'll focus on the strategic priority of equity and well-being with a particular focus on our work in Indigenous education. But first, I thought I'd give you a little bit of a history lesson. So Sir Ken Robinson, to many in the education field, is considered an international lead on changing the way we look at education. So he speaks about how most developed countries did not have a mass system of public education much before the 19th century. And this was created out of a response to meet the labor needs of the Industrial Revolution. So schools are organized on the principles of mass production. Education was founded on the premise of good workers rather than independent creative thinkers. So this visual here is from a TED Talk that Sir Ken Robinson uses to explain the concept that education was about sitting in rows to learn a specific skill set that the workforce required. So this is, as you know, quite archaic, outdated, and it stifles what we believe in, which is student voice, student creativity, and student individuality. So in education, we certainly have our work cut out for us if we're going to undo a system that was founded on everyone being educated for the same end goal or in the same way. So we've learned today that we must plan and implement change. And one way we do this is through our multi-year strategic plan, or what we call the MySP. So equity and well-being is one of our strategic priorities for our multi-year strategic plan. And this slide shares with you some of the areas of focus on our current school year. So as you can see, we're looking to create an actual equity team here at the board, which looks at various areas such as LGBTQ2S+ identifiers, looking at who are we serving in our schools by using demographic data to collect and then share so that our teachers know who is in front of them in the classroom and how to address their needs. Also, we're looking at empowering students and staff by using self-regulation skills to ensure that educators are using things like student profiles to understand what the student requires in order to be successful in their classroom. But today I'm going to focus on one area in particular through my Indigenous education lens. And this is building student capacity for intercultural understanding, empathy, and mutual respect through meaningful and relevant educational programs that are delivered uniformly and equitably. These are words from the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action, and really is our basis for our work in Indigenous education in the Algonquin and Lakeshore Catholic District School Board. So our goal this year is to elevate and create authentic Indigenous education in our schools. And we believe if you bring awareness to Indigenous education, it will create space for dialogue and understanding of the true history, cultures, and traditions of Indigenous people, which then can spark action. And this action will bring mutual respect and empathy for those that walked first on these lands. So our focus in Indigenous education is K-12. And this is implemented through board-wide initiatives such as Indigenous speakers, celebrations, visual reminders of indigeneity in our schools, and through authentic programming to foster community and educate not only our students, but our staff as well. Because we know our best work begins when our staff feel comfortable with curriculum and connected to it. Then our students can connect. So this slide provides a bit of an overview of some of our work. And I'd like to take the remainder of our time to share some specific examples of our work this year. So we started off the school year with two major board-wide initiatives, Orange Shirt Day and Treaties Recognition Week. And while these initiatives are reflected in many school boards across Canada, we have strived to work with local cultural consultants to approach the individual needs of our schools and our local Indigenous communities. So our focus is on Indigenous education in a way to respond to our calls to action through listening to and responding to the needs of our local treaty partners and our Indigenous communities on whose land we are on. So both of these initiatives received strong responses across our schools, which really to us demonstrated the eagerness and the commitment of our teachers and our students to engage in difficult but important conversations. And if you see here, there are three words that kind of root our work in Indigenous education to bring inclusivity and equity to our work. And those three words are awareness, understanding, and action. So I've sort of flushed out to you in this slide what Treaties Recognition Week looked under those three premises. So for awareness, we know that our teachers need to be aware and have really connective curriculum to work from. So we provided them with the 4 Seasons of Reconciliation education resource. We know that understanding, and that means that students at each grade level understand age-appropriate resources of curriculum expectations, and that the work that they're using to find those answers is age-appropriate, so they can engage and feel that they are included in the work. And then action. That means that we have to provide our students with the opportunity to dialogue about important topics. So bringing in guest speakers like Maury Switzer, he spoke to our grade 5 through 8 students through Teams meetings, as well as our Indigenous credits in high school and our grade 10 history program. And the actions that come out of that activity were really to understand how we are all treaty people. And that was his message. How are you a member of the people that you walk with on the land? So that Treaties Recognition Week was a really powerful week in our system. And throughout the year, and partially in response to COVID, we've created a family of schools in the elementary panel for each of our knowledge holders that we work with. So well designed for community and student safety, this has allowed for communities to build relationships and foster an appreciation for the teachings they are being offered as they invite virtual knowledge keepers virtually, sometimes in person, often engaging in cultural and land-based pedagogy specific to where the school is located. And in February, we celebrated a full month of virtual Indigenous workshops. We actually offered 150 workshops board-wide. Amazing. So through K to 8, students engaged in a variety of different topics with a knowledge keeper that is devoted to their schools. So on the screen here, you'll see 2 examples of how, again, it's related to the age group, appropriate curriculum, but it's delivered by an authentic Indigenous voice. And that person is connected to that school community and will be connected in the weeks and years to come. So we're really building a relationship with our knowledge keepers. And so next month, we're excited to be virtually welcoming Nagan Sinclair. He's a renowned Indigenous author, activist, and public speaker who'll be working with our intermediate and senior student. And he's going to be offering an entire week of workshops to our schools. Some of the themes that he's going to be working on are greetings and gifts, treaties and territories, Canada the village, challenges and changes. And then to culminate the week, he's going to be talking about, again, that reconciliation and what that looks like in the future. So we're really going to collaborate to bring that next step to it. So how do we act upon the work that we're doing together? So this will be an incredible opportunity for all our 7, 8 and secondary students to engage with Nagan as we honor his gifts, his wisdom, his knowledge, his commitment to Indigenous education. And then another really important topic for us this year, because as Sean's already mentioned, our wide stretching board, we're on the traditional lands and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, both the Ojibwe and Algonquin and the Haudenosaunee. And we also work with our Métis and our Inuit consultants to reflect the needs of our students. And again, it goes back to that point of equity and inclusion. Who is in our buildings? Who are we serving? Do we know that information so then that we can make sure they're represented in our communities? So real intentional work. So this fall, we moved our school board's land acknowledgement into all of our schools after Treaties Recognition Week, which allowed for teachers and educators to look more deeply into treaty relationships and agreements, land grants, as well as unceded territories. And while all schools are entering a relationship with the land acknowledgement at a different pace, there's a developing awareness that land acknowledgements are living documents, which means they are meant to be spoken from the heart with a strong awareness of pre-contact history. And that's why the work in Treaty Recognition Week was laying that foundation. So we're working with a cultural consultant from the Mohawk Bay of Quinte to help us deepen our understanding of land acknowledgements through knowledge, relationship building, and gratitude. And here what I've shared with you is a couple of excerpts from some of the communications that we use within our board. So we wanted to not only invite our teachers to become more knowledgeable and comfortable with the concept of land acknowledgement and what a land acknowledgement is, and how it impacts our school community, who says a land acknowledgement and why do we say it, But not only that, to build capacity, as I said, as we started this conversation, as you know, really the root of Truth and Reconciliation Commission work, our call to action is to ensure we build capacity. And that's not only in our students, but in our teachers, so they're comfortable with it. But then as well, our administrators. So as the leader in a building, you need to understand what's going on in your school community, be able to respond to it, and to feel comfortable with it, and be an active participant. So we included them in our work as well. So, you know, my goal today was really to share how the Algonquin and Lakeshore Catholic District School Board embraces its responsibility to ensure schools are inclusive spaces and providing access to the best learning environment, no matter what school you attend in our board. So our work in Indigenous education, for example, happens in our very near North School in a way that's reflective of that community, to our biggest high school in the Kingston area has the exact same opportunities. We want to make sure that we are equitable and that we are providing to all students so that they see themselves in the classroom. And as I said with Sir Ken Robinson's example, we are certainly rooted in a system that wasn't necessarily designed for voice and choice. And that's student voice and student choice. But we are making intentional steps towards changing this. And I think our work in Indigenous education is a great example of that mind shift that we continue to strive for. And that's rooted in a really great foundational plan, like our multi-year strategic plan, which then branches out into our equity and well-being plan. And that, you know, the fact that we have built so many cultural consultant relationships, that we can call on our knowledge keepers that are connected to our schools to work with our students and our staff. Those Indigenous partners are the key to working with our students, because they're the ones that share the voice of their story so that we ensure that we are authentic in our representation of them. And so, you know, this kind of ends my formal part of my sharing, and I'd certainly be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Carrie Smith-Dewey. Do we have any questions for Carrie? Don't be shy. I can't see everybody on the screen. Councilor Millette, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. I had both at one point.
Good man. Okay. What's your question?
Yes, Carrie. It's rather ironic or coincidental, I guess, that you're speaking at today on the initiatives that the school board is having, and I'm bringing for discussion in today's agenda an Indigenous land acknowledgement statement that perhaps we as a city, for committees and hopefully council at some point will adopt. Do you have the actual acknowledgement statement that's been adopted by the school board, or is there one?
Yes, actually, I should have shared that behind me, but certainly I'd be happy to forward that on to the group if they'd like to see it, because it's a great example of the process that we went through. So we acknowledge the lands we're walking on and the people that come before us, and take that space and pride to do so. And so we took about a year to develop that, Chris. We consulted with all of the knowledge keepers that sat on our Indigenous IAC committee, which is our advisory council. And actually this year, for the first time, we have our independent advisory council. So it is just an Algonquin representation. So we had many voices at the table to ensure that we were capturing a land acknowledgement that recognized our vast area that we sit on. Then we were happy to promote that now in our schools. It's part of our opening exercises every day. It's part of any celebration in our school community. And it's given by a non-Indigenous voice, because that's who's to recognize the land. So we're very proud of it. And I will certainly share that with you if that's helpful.
Okay, because the one that, well, actually I have two that we're going to discuss later in our agenda.
Sure.
And the first is one that's been adopted by Loyalist College, and
Right.
it specifically recognizes, I'll just quickly quote it here, traditional territory of the Wendat. And here we go, Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee,
Yes.
directly adjacent to the Kenyan Keeka Mohawk community of Tyndonega.
Right.
So, I mean, I think the school board may cover more areas and more Indigenous peoples, but yeah, I'd like to see that. But again, this is to start our conversation going today. So
Yeah, for sure. I'll make sure Sean gets a copy of it, and it would be a great one as a reference. And certainly have some amazing cultural consultants that work on land acknowledgement specifically, who I can connect you with from the Mohawk Bay of Quinte, if that's helpful to your development.
absolutely, yes. And well, that's the thing. I mean, I placed it on the agenda today to get the ball rolling on this. And I certainly, I mean, if there's a better, and it sounds like you've certainly done an awful lot more in way of research and input than cobbling together what I've managed to get today. So thanks very much, Carrie.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Dr. Arona, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. Just wondering, the Indigenous education, is this considered, does it come under the curriculum of Canadian history?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so actually our curriculum from K to 12 all has an aspect of Indigenous education, so a strand or an expectation within. It usually does reside in the history curriculum from K to 8. It then arrives again in grade 9 in Indigenous art. In grade 10, there is an actual credit that's independent of our history course, which also studies at a grade 10 open level. But our grade 10 history curriculum does have an entire devotion to that as well. In the Algonquin and Lakeshore Board, in our grade 11 World Religions course, it sits as an independent area. So we honor several different religions in that program, and we look at Indigenous spirituality there. And we also, all of our board, grade 11 board wide, all take grade 11 Indigenous Voices English. So we do not offer the regular grade 11 English anymore. It's all done through the Indigenous voice. So all of the texts that we read, all of the speakers we bring in are from Indigenous historical context. So it's an amazing course. And then our grade 12 program actually has an Indigenous education lens of kind of a world history look. So we actually offer something K to 12 and look at curriculum that's specific to the age groups.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Doctor. Any other questions?
I had a question, if that's okay, Chair.
Sure, take it away. Go ahead, Aaron.
Great. Thank you again for the presentation. I really appreciate it. It was really interesting to learn about all these different initiatives. So well done. Thank you. Our committee here is also interested in a number of different forms of discrimination, inclusion, equity, diversity. Is there any other brief comments you might be able to offer around initiatives towards anti-racism, inclusion of LGBTQ2S+ folks, or accessibility lens, anything that you might be able to share with us?
Sure. I certainly, thanks, Aaron, for the question. I could talk all day about these topics because they're just so many layers and they're intertwined. So one thing I will say is that I'll go back to the whole concept of an equity and well-being team. So the board has actually created a system level team that looks at many different aspects. So for example, do we have an eye on how we support our students who are identifying by a different gender or are identifying as transgender in our school communities? How are we creating a safe space for them to acknowledge and talk about that? How do we share with our teachers the language and the supports so that they're comfortable in supporting our students. So that's one area of work. The other area of work that I guess I would bring that's quite current is the de-streaming of the grade 9 math program. So I'm not sure if you're really overly aware of that in education. It's a big deal right now. And the whole premise behind that change, which what I mean by de-streaming is right now we offer an academic grade 9 program, an applied grade 9 program, and a locally developed grade 9 program. And students are streamed from grade 8 into one of those areas. And what the Ministry of Education has determined is that in grade 9, they feel it would be better that students come into an open level credit where all of those areas, minus the locally developed group, are together in one program. Now, for many of our school and our classes, we do this already, for example, in English, because we feel that bringing students together and allowing them to learn from each other's strengths is sometimes a better working environment than to peg them into a hole as they come into grade 9. So that idea that we're wiping out that concept that you need to be in a certain area when you start grade 9, and that's the stream you're flowing on. Instead, we're trying to continue to offer students the opportunity to spread their wings, figure out their strengths, and to feel comfortable in the classroom. But with de-streaming math, that comes with a lot of work because our teachers, as I said, are programmed to kind of teach in a certain way. And that's no different in grade 9 math. So this year, we're really working on understanding what does that mean for our students coming into grade 9? How are we going to support them in that environment so they feel included? So when they're sitting beside the student that's getting it and understanding the math and they're not, how is that not a shaming situation, but how are we going to wrap around and support them so that we do see how they are going to move forward in that program? So I would say de-streaming math is definitely something from an equity lens more than a mathematical lens that we're really looking at. And that's a mind shift for us and something that we are really looking to ensure we put as our forefront of our thinking and planning as opposed to after the fact, which is really important. It's not about the math, it's about the students sitting in front of us. And that's really something I would say we're focusing on.
Great, thanks so much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you, Gary. Councilor Garnet Thompson has a question for you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And it's interesting that you're starting with a very important aspect in our community, the Indonesian. But my part of my question is more on the discrimination of certain students and the bullying aspect. What's the schools doing towards, or in courses, or how are they trying to grasp because bullying is a big part of the growing up, the education, the integrating of the different nationalities, colors of people. How is the schools trying to work with that? Because that is a big part of inclusion in not separating people in our community.
Yeah, no, actually, Garnet, that's a great question, and it has a lot of layers, because I think how I would begin that responding to that, Garnet, is to think about the fact that if we don't understand our students and we don't have a relationship with them, then we don't know how to begin to support them. And one thing that really stands true for us in education is that, we can't put our head in the sand and think that there are not issues in our schools, because they are. And so one thing that we really use to support building community is what we call restorative circles or restorative practices. And so sometimes putting yourself in the other person's shoes really helps you understand the why behind the situation. And that takes a lot of time. Yeah. But, in our schools, we've created so many supports, such as social workers, youth workers, addictions counselors, mental health and wellness nurses. So we have a wraparound effect to a situation where if two people are in conflict or someone's feeling like they're being bullied, it's their perspective. We need to honor that and support that. And so that means finding the why out and then bringing in the resources to repair that relationship. And I would say that that is absolutely the foundational strength of the Algonquin and Lakeshore Catholic District School Board. It's why I get up every day and come to work, because I really feel that we build relationship with students so that we can walk alongside them when there are situations such as bullying, or they feel that they're not included, that we're not afraid to tackle that situation and get to the root of the why and to support students. And that may respond in different ways. We always try and have that person recognize what that other side of the coin might look like and why they're doing what they're doing. So restorative circles would be a huge way where we sit down with a mediator and support two students or 3 students or however many it might be together to walk through a situation. And that begins at a very young age. So the Caring and Safe Schools teacher that works with me actually goes into classrooms and shares a restorative circle with students, talks about how we listen and honor other people's voices and recognize others' needs. And so we use that strategy at a really, very early age to help respond to those situations so that people have tools in their tool belt so that when a situation arises and a conflict seems unrecognizable or unresolvable, that we have some tools to deal with that. And so that's one aspect of how we would support students.
Thank you, but I just want to make a statement with how you talk about the Catholic School Board. One of my grandkids is finishing grade 8 and going into grade 9. Not here, but
Okay.
she's decided to go to a Catholic school in grade 9 because she feels there's some discrimination in the public, and that's true or not true, I don't know, but she feels more comfortable going into the Catholic school board system in grade 9 she just feels more comfortable there for what you people are doing across Ontario, and it's in the Kingston area. So it's interesting how you're doing that. So that's why I thought it was important to at least bring that aspect out. So
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Councilor Thompson. Any other questions? I have a question for you, Carrie. It's actually 2. Thanks for the presentation today, but off the top, I'll give you the 2 questions. Off the top, you mentioned that you were part of the pandemic team, if you will. We hear a lot of talk about mental health, high schools, and I'd like you to address what do you think the pandemic has done to, we'll use schools in Ontario, particularly here in our area, and what potentially we could be looking for down the road. And the last question, the second part is, over the past few years, events globally have made us all think, how has education changed some of its mindset? And as you said in your commentary, who are we serving? That question now for school boards globally, with the movements from different folks, how does that affect how you roll out education in 2021? So we'll let you start with the pandemic first.
Oh, so pandemic is you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. It's been a huge part of everything we do each and every day. So I started pandemic work in July. I actually wanted to come in and begin my role, even though it didn't start until August, because I really felt I walked away from a school not being able to say goodbye to my students and the staff in a real genuine way, not being able to watch students walk across the graduation stage. There was a lot of uneasy feelings about how we moved from March break. And I think back, and I tell this story a lot, when we were packing up at March break last year, I remember getting on the announcements, and the kids always tease me because I pause and I wait for them so I know they're listening. And I said, I want you to clean out your locker like you're going home for summer break, because we wanted to make sure they didn't leave all their stuff in there over March break. And never for a moment did I think that was going to be the truth of the matter. And so I think I really felt, and I'll go back to what Garnet said, responsibility. We feel a collective responsibility to ensure our students feel safe and secure. And that was really difficult at the beginning. We scrambled to figure out what that looked like. But what I can say with great respect to our teaching staff is that we found ways to connect to our students. We put in place many different supports. You know, our youth workers called our students. Our student success teachers reached out to families and made drop-offs. We made sure that every student in our board had technology that could use it. And if they couldn't use technology, we provided them with paper copies of work just so that they felt connected. I remember spending one weekend driving around, dropping off gift cards for groceries to our families. And all of our administrators did that because we knew some families were really struggling. But as much as the pandemic has been a really difficult go for schools, and the uneasiness of knowing whether or not we're staying or we're going from the school one day to the next, the stress that our teachers are under, the duress that our students feel, is really real. It's very real. People are tired. But with that said, I've had more people tell me that the community that's built in a classroom, being together every day, is phenomenal, especially in secondary, where teachers are used to compartmentalizing and have students for just a 73-minute block and then they move on to someone else. Having their teacher all day, they are building community and they're building connections with people and they're looking after each other. And it's phenomenal that we are figuring out ways to support one another through this. And I think the next few months are going to be very hard, but we're moving in the right direction. So I do feel that for the most part, as much as we know day to day that students are struggling, they've worn masks without any concerns. They've adjusted to lining up in the hallway in a different way to use the washroom. They have understood that social distancing in the classroom means I can't sit beside my buddy, but I can still work with them. They have just adapted. Students are amazing to adapt. And it's probably the adults that are having the more difficult time adapting. But we get our strength from the students that we serve, and they're there every day. And whether we do it remotely or we do it in person, we're working through it.
And I just wanted to touch on just the question about globally, when we see things in the last couple of years, how does the school board react to make sure that their school community, is taking note of what's happening around the world?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like a twofold question for me. I think when you first asked the question, I thought about the idea of, how are we creating 21st century learners? How are we ensuring that they are ready to walk outside of our building and feel that they are prepared to walk a path and be successful? And, it goes back to our Catholic graduate expectations, which are the areas that we focus on from K to 12 to ensure our students are responsible citizens, that they're collaborators, that they're contributors. All of those things are really important. And we have so many ways to ensure that students are given opportunity for different pathways. We have programs like Specialist High Skills Major, which allows students to do accreditations and things that they find they are passionate about. They're able to access Loyalist College, for example, for different programs for dual credits and youth apprenticeship programs. St. Lawrence College is a great support to our system as well. But with that said, when we see things going on around the world, the one thing that I will say again is our faith is the root of what we do every single day. And when we see things happening around the world, that is that space that we create that we don't even speak about. It just happens. We create space to foster conversations to support our students. So when things like pandemics arise, that we find ways through our own common language, our faith, to really talk about situations and ensure our students feel that they know that that's a space they can talk about things. And I definitely think we do that without even knowing it. And that is that uncommon language that allows us to deal with things in a different way, to recognize that something that's traumatic internationally could definitely be something that we then learn from and address. And I definitely see that is something we do very differently in our board.
Thanks, Carrie Smith-Dewey. She's the Superintendent of Education with the Algonquin Lakeshore Catholic School Board. Kat, do you have a question?
I do. I won't take too much time. I just wanted to sort of follow up on that, on what you were saying, Chair Kelly, about the global issue and the movement of people. And Carrie, whether there's a lot of newcomers in this community, newcomer students in your schools, and the structures and supports and challenges you have with that you have in place.
Yeah, no, that's a great concept to kind of cover too, Kat, because we do welcome many newcomers. And I would say that the one place that we build that connection is through our parishes. So our parishes are often the places where our newcomers will find their initial supports, and then it's through there that we build that capacity within our schools. And so that starts that fostering of what kind of connections in the communities do we need to make for our newcomers. And we build that capacity, whether it's our relationship with our resource center, whether it's a relationship with a community resource, an access center, for example, whether it's a relationship for the parents of our newcomer parents with our adult education model. We have so many access points for them. Our resources through our military families resource center is amazing. We have a great relationship there. So our role really is kind of that hub to connect the entire family. Whether it's through school, whether it's community, or whether it's parish. And we kind of work simultaneously to create that wraparound effect with our families. And I think that's something that Garnet's really speaking to there, that there is an attractiveness to our system because we do look at that whole wraparound effect. We're not just serving our students, we're serving their families as well. And so that newcomer that begins in our classroom we're serving their entire family.
Thanks, Kat.
Thanks.
I really appreciate your time and joining the conversation today, Carrie. Really appreciate this and continued success, and wish you all the best down the stretch and a safe end to 2021. All right.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you. It was kind of Carrie to give up some time. Moving on to new business. 7.1 Victoria Law is not available today. I think there was a bit of reprint of the agenda, but Victoria's not here. We'll go to Dr. Aruna Alexander with some comments about an event coming up, or last week's event, which was really well done, Doctor.
Thank you. I've written down, to respect your time, written down what I want to say. So this is connected to our committee's annual events. It's not about any particular annual event. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the issue of the history of our Belleville Inclusion Committee and the importance of recognizing its history at our annual events. As you may know, I was the person from our community who originally proposed the idea to our former mayor, Neil Ellis, in 2014. When I suggested to him that the city of Belleville should seriously consider joining the Canadian Coalition of Municipalities Against Racism and Discrimination, Mayor Ellis was very receptive to the idea. Together, we collaborated to lay the foundation stones of our present-day Inclusion Committee. In our municipal history, I believe it is particularly important to acknowledge that the idea for the Inclusion Committee came from an immigrant who arrived in Canada in 1967. She saw through immigrant eyes and immigrant experience that there was a need for such a focus in our community, and therefore broke new ground and worked along with the Municipal Council and the Mayor of 2014 to establish the Belleville Inclusion Committee. This fact that this committee was born when I, an immigrant woman, worked in a collaborative partnership with a Canadian-born mayor and his council is a perfect model of inclusion. We have diversity and inclusivity built into the very foundation of the Belleville Inclusion Committee. As Mike Callahan, the Chief of Police, said in a speech to our community on March 18th, diversity becomes transformed into inclusivity when people from diverse backgrounds not only live in our community, but find that their contributions are accepted and valued. If we do not recognize and value diverse contributions to our community, there is no legitimate inclusivity. In light of the above, I would request that the history of our committee be publicly acknowledged without any hidden figures at the committee's annual events, and that the historical legacy of the Belleville Inclusion Committee be preserved in writing for future mayors and future Inclusion Committee members. A sample paragraph recording this history, for those of you who do not have one, I will send it to you. Therefore, I would move that this history of the founding of the Belleville Inclusion Committee be recognized and retained in writing and brought to life each year by briefly telling the story of its origin at our annual events. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, for your comments. I would fully support this, keeping the history of the Belleville Inclusion Committee. You talked about 2014, and I know your work with the Canadian Coalition Against Racism, and that history should be retained. And I'd be willing to work with you. And I know a great writer on our team, Councilor Millette. So the three of us will get together with two journalists with background. We'll ask you questions, you share the history, and Councilor Millette will write it up. And we will make sure that that's certainly acknowledged at all the events that we'll have, more than just the annual event, because I believe we're going to have lots of events down in the future to share that history. So are you good with that?
Yes, I am. I'm pleased about the fact that I, as an immigrant woman, worked with, as I said, Canadian-born mayors and councillors. And that's a good model for our community.
Your story got this all going. So look where we are today. Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, and I encourage that 100%, Mr. Chair. And seeing I was the original chair of the Inclusion Committee when we got it going under Mayor Neil Ellis, I would like to second that motion. But I'd also, if it's okay with you, would like to be in part involved in the getting a little bit of the history down, and some of it because it does go back to quite a few years, and we've made some big progress. We're making continuous progress. I just like to be involved in that because I was certainly feel very honored that I was able to chair that committee for a number of years and would like to take part.
Well, thank you, Councilor Thompson, for your comments. And I know you'll add lots to several paragraphs to Councilor Millette writing up this special historical fact. See that, Councilor Millette? You're getting lots of good work.
I've been voluntold for various things. I'm used to it. Thank you.
Good. So the motion was made by Dr. Rona Alexander to continue with the history. We'll come up with the script and share it. at all our events moving forward. And we hope to get to that maybe in a few months. We could have a script put together. And Councilor Thompson, you're going to second that. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Doctor. Well done.
Well, thank
Great
you.
suggestion. Councilor Millet, Indigenous Land Declaration. We'll let you pick it up from there.
Well, I think we had, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we had an excellent intro, and I don't know if you planned it that way or if it was just serendipity, but I see that we had an excellent presentation today on just this very thing. So in a nutshell, what I'm proposing and what I would like to do then, if after hearing from Carrie today in her presentation, see if we can't hone this a little more. Now, I've sent out to be included with the package for today what the original one was. The Indigenous Land Acknowledgement is the title at the top. And as I read earlier, it reads, I would like to begin acknowledging that the land on which we gather this day is a traditional territory of the Wendat and Anishinaabe Haudenosaunee peoples, and directly adjacent to the, that's the one that gets me, Kanyankaka Mohawk community of Tyendinaga. So that one is was actually taken from Loyalist College, and it was, I believe, if my research was correct, it was a collaborative effort of the college and its Indigenous Studies program at the college. And the second item that I just forwarded today, some of you may or may not have seen it. Perry DeCola, our Director of Environmental Services for the City of Belleville, he works with the Walkerton Center for, I'm going to get the name wrong, but the Walkerton Center for Drinking Water, and gives many presentations around the province. And the second statement, Indigenous land statement that he gives is the following, and it's much more simple. I would like to make the following statement. I want to acknowledge that we are on lands traditionally occupied by Indigenous peoples. They continue to care for this land. They continue to shape our community today, and I want to show my respect. Hundreds of years of the first treaties were signed. They're still relevant today. Thank you. Now, we have two, and what I'm hoping is that maybe we can table these for now. Carrie said she would get back with us, perhaps with some resources from the people that they use to develop, and maybe between these and what we get from Carrie, from what the board has as their declaration, we can come up with something. And what I'm proposing, and I know this is an awful lot in one big gush, but what I'm proposing is that going forward, at the very least, this committee, and I would suggest that all city committees, as we meet, opening every meeting, would make this part of their opening statements of their meetings. I think it's important, and I know we're certainly not inventing the wheel here. We're coming late to the party. Federal and provincial gatherings, government gatherings now increasingly are making these statements, and rightly so. And I think it's time we do. And I would like to, at some point, consider bringing this from this committee, perhaps to City Council, and having City Council at the opening of our meeting. I mean, we have a reflection. There's no reason why prior to the reflection at the opening of every meeting of City Council, because let's face it, we are meeting at the very mouth of the Moira River, which was an important gathering place for Indigenous people in our community for hundreds of years. So at the very least, we can acknowledge that. So that's where I'm going with this. I'm open to any comments, but ideally, I guess what I'd like to do is table these two statements. again here, perhaps from Carrie from the presentation from the school board, see what theirs is about, and perhaps Ms. Smith Dewey can offer us some guidance, or maybe some of their people will work with us, and maybe at perhaps our next meeting we can set aside some time to hammer out a cohesive or a proper statement to adopt for recommend adoption to City Council. I think it's important, and I think it's well past due that we do this. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilor Millette. Ruth, question?
Yeah, I would agree with what Chris is suggesting. I think it's when Police Chief Callahan was giving some statistics about our area in his presentation last week. He did speak about the percentage of white people was 90%, but the next demographic of people that's the largest in our area is Indigenous. It's 4.4%. And we do live in a community, like Councilor Millette has said, that is Indigenous. We do have the Indigenous population, but I like the idea of looking at what the Algonquin School Board has done. They spent a year, studying this, and so I'm sure they have a lot of ideas, like whether, you mentioned just Indigenous. I know there's Aboriginal, Métis, and there are different things, and we want to make sure we're the most respectful to this population, which is our second biggest demographic here in the city. So
Thank you, Ruth. Anybody else have any comments on Councilor Millette's push to get this going? Dr. Aruna?
I'd like to thank Councilor Millette for bringing this to us. I think it's crucial, and I hope that the process will involve, taking it up to council and that it will move forward. It's important for our community.
Thank you. Anybody else? Just to add to what Councilor Millette brought up, I know when I was a trustee with the Catholic School Board that this was routine. We would thank our Indigenous community and the lands we're on. So that's been going on for years, and fully support Councilor Millette. Kat, you have something you wanted to say?
I was just going to echo the same comments, but that we have also been talking about doing that on the Quinte Local Immigration Partnership, but just want to make sure that we're going to do it right, which is why we haven't done it yet. So it's the getting that, doing it the right way and getting the correct, well, not correct, but the way that's most respectful down, I think is important.
Thank you. Yes. Anybody else on that?
Yep.
Chris, go ahead. Yep.
Can you hear me? I'm screwing around with my little on mic button. Can you hear me? Okay. All right, great. Yeah, in closing, that's exactly it, as Kat said. I think we want to, it's not so much getting it right. We want to just make sure that we're respectful of recognizing all the any of the important original peoples, and not to, all of a sudden adopt a policy that this is the City of Belleville's Indigenous Land Acknowledgement Statement to find out, whoops, we left somebody out. So I think it's important, and I actually, if anybody here has ever taken part in a blanket ceremony or a blanket session, I did at Hastings and Prince Edward Health Unit a couple of years ago. It's very important, very moving, and that's where the kernel of this idea, I think, started with me. And I would like to see this forward, and I think the community will embrace it. I think we're onto something that will be quite important and quite popular. So I look forward to moving forward with this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Millette. Full support of this committee, and I know you'll get it from the city as well. New committee members. Last night, council voted on or accepted the new names that are going to be joining all the different committees for the city. We have Summer Bertrand and Rhonda Schmidt joining the Belleville Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Committee. So we'll welcome them to the next meeting, which will be held on April the 20th. Other points of interest, this is not on the list, but Mayor Mitch Panchuk reached out to me last week, and he's hoping our committee can work towards a Diwali celebration in the fall. We'll work with Loyalist College. And when the mayor asks, sometimes we listen and we'll work with them. And we're looking forward to this. We'll see if we can put together a subcommittee, and over the next few weeks, I'm going to be doing some investigation on a Diwali celebration and how we can work with Loyalist College and make it a real fun celebration for the city come maybe October, early November, pending on where we're at with the pandemic. So that's ahead of us. Also too, I wanted to get this in. I signed up to Lambton College for their diversity inclusion courses. There's 8 in total that I'm taking. It's free. And I know we talked about this before, but I have a contact if you're interested. Tiffany Crow is based out of Madoc. She works with Lambton College on this. It's on the house. You get a certificate. Plus, it's just another way to learn, and it's an up-to-date information course that they have. So if you're interested, reach out to me, and I'll give you Tiffany's contact information. Anything else today that anybody else wants to get in? Councilor Millet.
I'm sorry. No, it's all right. I would have asked it of Carrie Smith Dewey, but it was regarding the speaker that they had for the Catholic board, and that was Morris Switzer. And just a small note, Morris Switzer was at one time, just prior to my arrival at the Intel, he was managing editor of the Intelligencer. So yeah, as a little known fact that we did have an Indigenous senior editor at the Intelligencer, although oddly enough, in those days, Morris, and maybe that was indicative of the time, Morris didn't speak of his Indigenous heritage. We just assumed he was German with a name like Switzer, but now he's quite well known as a speaker and an author and a representative for Indigenous voices. So yeah, just a small point there, but yeah, I see when I saw his name, I remembered him. So
thank you. Also too, thanks for the time today. We're just a little over 11:30, and I hope you enjoyed today's meeting. Thanks to Sheila Alexander for quarterbacking this and getting everybody together. Mark Coyle, thank you for your production work. It'll be up on the city's YouTube channel. We were live today. And thanks for your energy. If you have any suggestions for meetings, just email me. This is really important as we move forward here. We've had some really good guest speakers over the last couple of meetings, and we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but I'm really enjoying it, and I hope you are too. And Chris Berry, we're not going to let you go today without saying a word, even if you give us a weather forecast. What would you like to say?
Oh, it was great. Lots of good information shared, and I'm wondering if we're going to move forward at the city with the land declaration, if that's something that could be brought to the Police Services Board as well.
Yes. Chris, did you want to touch on that, Councilman?
Yeah, and thanks for that, Chris. I think the intention will be eventually to make it part a declaration that will be made at every committee and commission of city under the City Hall banner. So yes, it would hopefully ideally come under every group, from lighting display to this committee to the Police Services Board. Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. That's it. Call for a motion to adjourn. Councilor Thompson. Get a seconder. Councilor Millet. All those in favor? Opposed? Thanks, Kat. Kat was the only one opposed.
He's always trying to wake me up, this guy.